Okay, I've been up for a while and I'm ready for my second cup of coffee. Before I do that, I'm going to go over this stove. This is a 26-year-old. It's from Coleman Peak Apex 2 Model 445 multi-fuel stove. First, I'm going to go over some of the features that I like in a stove. One, it has an adjustment on the leg to level the stove. This tube they call a generator. The flame heats the tube, which heats the fuel, changes it from a liquid to a gas. This is a very old stove, obviously got a rebuild. 5 years ago, I took it into the factory and I just had to rebuild the stove. This is just a piece of aluminum tube with a bunch of holes drilled in it. This part of the windscreen was standard equipment, came on the stove. This band of aluminum that you see is a band that I made for windscreen. Of course, it blocks the wind and holds up the pot supports that I made. These are brackets that hold an electric fan to the radiator of your car. Inside here, the flame deflector, the old one is still in there. I don't know if the camera's picking that up or not, but it was burned out, especially on one side. And I put the band from a mason jar lid in there for flame detectors, flame deflectors. So the old deflector is surrounded by a mason jar lid. Before I light it up, I'm going to go through some of these safety systems. One, the bottle must be turned on. This spigot must be collapsed to allow fuel to squirt out. That's why this protective cover is on there for when you're not using the stove. And of course, the stove would be on for you to leak fuel out somewhere. Okay, now the stump is not level. Let me lower this side a little bit. Okay, so when I light the stove, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a match ready. You could use a ferro rod and throw some sparks in there. You can use a lighter, any old thing. I'm going to take a match and I'm going to put a lit match right under that tube that is the generator. They call it a generator. There are two different generators. One is for gasoline and white gas. This may look dirty because I am running car gas in there today. I'm going to light the match, put it in there. I'm going to turn this bottle on so you can see the stove lit. I'm going to turn the stove on a little more. And it should take in this weather, it shouldn't take long to preheat that generator and get this thing going. In the meantime, I'm going to sort of level the stove a little bit. It's not going to matter. All I'm going to do is boil a pint of water. The flame is pretty orange because that's car gas. It's just not the cleanest stuff in the world. You can hear a little hiss. I don't know if the camera is picking it up, but down there in the burner, you'll see a bluish flame. So that tube is probably close to being preheated enough. Now when I crank this thing on, you'll hear some pulsing, and that is normal. It's supposed to do that. I should cover the cup. One, keep the bugs out and keep the heat in. It's warming up this morning, so I'll just let it go. So while that's cooking, I will say that one selling point that was important to me when I bought the stove was that it came with a bottle. It was ready to go out of the box. I didn't have to buy the stove and then buy a bottle. It was ready to go. It was complete. Everything I needed was there. The stove is discontinued. I could have shopped for parts and found some parts and replaced it with more original equipment stuff. Probably by serious backpacking standards, brand new, the stove may have been a little heavy for the discriminating backpacker that's really looking at weight. The water is boiling. It's not really boiling out of the cup yet, but the water is already boiling. So after I rebuilt the stove, I used some heavier aluminum than standard equipment. The pot supports are steel, and they are heavier by backpacking standards. This is simply heavy. I doubt that I will take this on backpacking trips. It's already been backpacking, canoeing, car camping, car travel. Now I'm going to turn the bottle off first, and I'm going to let that burner burn out fuel that's in the system. There you go, folks, just a look at a 26-year-old stove that got a rebuild 5 years ago. Some of the safety features. There, it's going to fizzle out. And thanks for watching from 44 degrees north latitude. And let's have our second cup of coffee.